I am so excited that this is over. It's awesome. It's really, really good. So because I can barely put two words together, I'm just going to say just how thankful I am to two aspects of Seventh Gallery's involvement throughout FOPA. So firstly, to their volunteer pool, which is a testament to the awesomeness of their community. Without them, it would have been just eminently difficult to have, make this work. So thank you very much to the 7 volunteers, amazing. And to Lucie McIntosh, who has been the designer, the social media person, that has basically done all the propaganda for this situation. And so thank you so much, Lucie, that's amazing. And to pivot to the real situation, John, Nguyen, brother, please do the proper introductions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hi. Thank you very much and welcome everyone. Thank you for coming here on a Sunday at 7 p.m. before we go back to our duties in real life. We're 7th. You can see our mob over there, as they call it, and I'm very happy and proud to be part of this. For those who don't know it, 7th is an artist-run platform that presents opportunities for artists and the broader community to come together and explore ideas, forms, knowledges, and ways of operating collectively in the late capitalism era we're in. 7 has been operating in Melbourne for over 20 years. I've been myself here only for 4, so I'm very happy to be part of this story and history. Our site is currently in Richmond, where we work and make and dream on the unceded lands of the Eastern Culling Nation. On behalf of our panel, I would like to acknowledge Aboriginal people as the first artists, the first educators, and the first carers of cultures who have been doing para-academia on this land forever. I'm going to just give you a little lowdown of how this session is going to go. First up, we'll have Dario, who will present a short lecture exploring the idea of what it means to be an artist-run in relation to notions of para-academia and collective equipment, expanding on some of the ideas that Matt put forward in the opening session of FOPA on Thursday. And then we'll have Mel that will talk a bit about their relationship to the ARI and teaching as a creative practice. Then we'll have Lucie, George, Dario, and myself, who will come back up here and have a bit of a panel discussion led by questions that come out of the session, and Dario's presentation, Mel's presentation as well, and we'll have some time to discuss with you. Thank you, and please come, Dario. It's your turn.
Thanks, John. Hello. So, what do we mean by ARI? ARI is Artist Run Initiative. Depending upon which part of the neo-colonial globe you're currently struggling on, that last word can be interchanged with space, centre, platform, or even, for all those neo-liberationalists out there, enterprise. Even though they each have different connotations, I think we can safely assume everyone in this room knows what these terms refer to in the construction of the noun, of the thing that is being done, a project, an event, a happening, action, site. Oh, this thing. This is, oh yes. But what do we mean by artist run? By we, I'm referring to the plethora of arts and affiliated workers who bandy these terms around as part of their bread and butter. However, it is probably better in this deconstructive, reconstructive talk to define what I mean by artist run. First up, let's start with the easier of the two words, run. In the context of an initiative, like a car, run means keeping the vehicle moving, greased up, lubed, surfaced, on the road, functioning, rear view mirrors intact, etc., etc. This term was brilliantly problematized sometime pre-Facebook by artist Danielle Freakley in her brilliant series Artist Running Space, where she, quote, lived as a human art gallery, exhibiting other artists' works on her body, in her gallery suit, in locations complementing their works. The locations included snake temples, S&M parlours, snowy mountains, the set of the Australian TV show Neighbours, and men's public toilets. But for now, let's keep the ning out of it and run with converting the car metaphor into more abstract initiative or space. Okay, but who is making it run? Artist. And who is artist? What I like about the term artist run is that it problematizes the individuation associated with the term artist. And for anyone who knows what it takes to keep the RE engine running, they know it is a collective, mutual effort. Artist is now a collective noun. Okay, I'll just riff. In the sense that it is a collective force running an initiative. Without boring into too much arguable nomenclature deconstruction, allow me to attempt one more definition of what an artist is by first referring to what an artist does. Simply, and I will get to a more complicated definition later, an artist is a person who practices art. What is art? Well, according to Burroughs, who was fed up with his fellow idiots arguing over definition of art, art is a 3-letter word. It is what you make it to mean. It is social and material, and social as material. It is aesthetic and abject. It's terrifying and caring. The 3 letters themselves are art when combined that way, and it should be understood as something beyond the word that represents it, a practice, a way, a process, an object, a subject, an affect. The important part is that art is what you, including those other yous who experience it, make of it. Something autonomous, free for you to define, not necessarily free of restraint, which is a kind bedfellow of practice, but free to determine, free to practice, free to do creativityness. The artist here is used as a synecdoche of the human, untethered to prior, sedentary, staid interpretations of the material social continuum. They are the promulgators of Alfred North Whitehead's creative process philosophy that all actuality, quote, is in the grip of the ultimate metaphysical ground, the creative advance towards novelty. Artists, therefore, are the human flow form of creativity process which all life engages. So, are all humans artists? If they choose to practice, yes. This is an argument for another time, especially how this relates to labour, value and time, but please keep in mind the kind of human being we are describing here is a collective artist body concerned with autonomy and self-determination. Come on, Bosch. No. Okay, to bring it home. In the A corner, an autonomous, self-determining, creative collective. In the R centre, that is doing, practicing, keeping going, operating. In the I corner, a space, a program, an eventing, an enterprise. And if we bring it all together, an RE is an autonomous, self-determining, creative, collective, operating, and initiative. I'll also add to this that the RE is also, in the spirit of Rosie Braidotti, involved in transformation of, quote, institutions into not-for-profit viral D-centres. Braidotti here is referring to what needs to happen in the post-humanities departments within the university. I'm going to go a little bit beyond the institution here and refer to the transformation of spaces, including non-physical sites, into not-for-profit viral D-centres that empower creative alternatives and value the oscillation between theory and practice. For decades, the RE has, of course, been an important adjunct for recent graduates to experiment and further explore the conceptual and material possibilities of their practice. surrounded by peers, cheap wine, often shitty food, and the occasional performance intervention, lecture, or artist forum. There is a need for this kind of activity, and the contemporary ARI should continue to act as a site where these formations occur. However, if we look a bit further, in that other elsewhere space between the gallery, university, union hall, church, private home, we find countless examples of what artisan art thinking is capable of when not confined to only describing its practice, where it engages in critical examinations of the economy, warfare, surveillance, consciousness, philosophy, politics, the numinous other, support movement, food security, etc. Where it can organise community, actuate propaganda, support movements, and be a positive contributor to solving the palimpsest of crisis that we all collectively face. The ARI is a serious contender in the deconstruction and reconstruction of the social imaginary through the principles and lens of the commons. This, I argue, is the world of the artist-run platform. A world where, due to the very fact of the perception of such spaces by the powers that be, will largely be left alone. We are seen as powerless places for pontificating ponces. They will not be looking. Of course, this movement of the undercommons has been growing like mycelium across the planet for decades. In this network, creative actions have the potential to shift the dial from commercialism to commonism. This term, commonism, is an important one. I'm borrowing it from Commonism, A New Aesthetics of the Real, edited by Nico Dox and Pascal Guillen. The central tenet of communist movements and aesthetics is sharing, quote, common intellectual ownership, new social cooperations, and a faith in peer-to-peer networks. This is akin to Mr. Keda's expansion of Guattari's concept of collective equipment in relation to para-academia, i.e., what equipment or tools can we collectively common in order for future generations to use and keep resourcing? How do we socialise infrastructure in such a way that the free flow of knowledge gets better with time? According to Antonio Negri, communism has the ability to transcend prevailing contemporary political ideologies, bridging the needs of liberalism, neo-nationalism, and religiously inspired political parties, all the people we love, all who lament as well that which has been robbed by capital. Contemporary communism is seen as a way towards social cohesion and redistribution, leading to equality and community. Prevailing ideologies ingrain themselves not just via economic supremacy, but also by becoming embedded in civil society, ultimately forming hegemonic power. Elements of this organic ideology are spread across education, workplaces, media, etc., entrenching, quote, a hegemonic system with its own concrete socio-economic system. Once Diaz and Nguyen have set up this framework in their argument of the necessity of ideology in forming and enforcing hegemony power, they then describe the importance of understanding Gramsci's war of position as a constant and shifting ground of antagonism between social classes. In seeking to expand on this idea within our current epoch, they contend that it is, quote, not enough to struggle for the control over the means of production, as it is equally important to struggle over the deconstruction of ideas and beliefs. Through this, they introduce Gramsci's idea of the organic intellectual, which in my reading refers to the intellectual who, arising from class struggle, is forever seeking to encourage counter-hegemonic ideas and ambitions to emancipate that class. The authors then present a key idea to their argument, and one which forms a scaffold for me to unpack ideas around the social effectiveness of art and artists and their spaces. Quote, artistic and cultural practices can provide spaces for resistance as they contribute to the disarticulation of previous ideological principles and the rearticulation of new forms capable of inaugurating a new consciousness in the precariat. It's a really good thing. For Louis Kamnitzer, the Uruguayan granddaddy of critical public pedagogy, where art and education are necessarily intertwined in a revolutionary project, art is not about making or the trading of objects. But it is an engine toward learning new ways of dealing with knowledge, of deconstructing the past and creating the future. Kamnitzer's project grew out of what he considers underground ideas which each generation must confront. In the 60s, this was research and processes that moved beyond the post-craft culture, which art is relegated to, into a position where the artist-researcher can imagine freely, unconstrained by prejudice and media, to formulate problems in the richest way possible. Kaunitsa would like to operate in a world of knowledge exchange where the artist, like the philosopher or the scientist, is asked, what problem are you working on? Rather than, what are you painting, producing, what are you showing? Where are you showing? Who's curating you? What medium are you using? For some artists, of course, and especially in high degree practice-led research in this country, the material technical process of making the thing is where the knowledge is embedded. Louis' take allows for this interpretation, but it also asks education to open into a deeper, more problematic territory where art schools and faculties are not training institutes, but sites of exploration, exchange and creation, where people learn how to handle knowledge in a creative way. Quote, making flexible citizens that constantly maintain a critical distance from which they can improve society. This sense of constant maintenance echoes what he calls revolution within revolution, informed by Kamnitz's concern with the location of power, where he and his anarchist cohort initiated their reforming of art education in Montevideo. This constant maintenance is key to avoid the always persistent thrust of power against the creative force of resistance, where a movement becomes the very ideology it initially opposed, which was the case of the Academy that formed out of his initial work in the 60s and which he is again engaged in trying to reform. Constant revolution. To undermine this strategy of conservative rot setting in, we must, as autonomous obscurant philosopher again Antonio Negri puts it, take power differently and then work to maintain this radical transition reversal. This constant cycle of revolution does not emerge dialectically from a direct and violent confrontation with the present, but engages with the present affirmatively and is actualized from conditions that are not there yet. They are virtual. That is to say, they need to be counter-actualized, created and brought about in collective effort. The key here is that alternative conditions need to be created and built collectively and consistently through constant molecular creative struggle resistance. Can this be a clarion call for artists and the sites they run? Okay, I'm going to take it back a little bit from theory stuff. So REs in Australia, don't ever have an easy run. You know? They are beholden to the whims of state funding, the laissez-faire of commercial real estate, and the burnout effect on volunteer and sometimes paid staff, whose invisible labour is more than often unseen by those who benefit from it. I do not necessarily mean the artistic network who have somewhere to show or see and be seen. There's those benefits as well. But I am pointing to those in the sector who derive a healthy income from the whole of ecology effect, of which the RE and the practices it supports are an economic driver. It can be a tough gig, but obviously rewarding in the unmeasurable way that being involved in something radical, freeing, creative, critical can be. Don't worry, I'm not going to get all neo-lib and talk about facts and figures as to the value and community benefit of arts and culture to our social ecology. Nor is this a pulpit to complain of the existential crisis that's been facing the independent arts sector that is well documented elsewhere. Some people argue that arts and culture should be valued as part of the foundational economy, as we do with health, care, education, housing, utilities, and food supply. Others argue that culture is not an industry and that art and culture need to renew their social contract and realign to a radical agenda for a more equitable future. Hear, hear. Now, whilst REs in the 80s were maligned to project-based funding only by the Australia Council, with contemporary art organisations in each state taking up the prize for organisational funding, a recent shift in investment thinking, i.e. grant-making, from the newly minted Creative Australia, has seen some REs like Seventh, Felt Space, First Draft, and In Flight funded through the Visual Arts Craft and Design Framework multi-year investment scheme, blah. Exciting times for some, shitty times for many others. As we heard earlier today, the work of Jan Bryant and Associates at Art Program is a prime example of an artist-led critical pedagogy. Their work is private, not for profit, whose pedagogical agenda and methodology is led and driven by researchers, not bean counters. And their program covers topics well beyond the scope of what a layperson thinks of art and artists. Slightly further afield is the Feral MBA, a radically reimagined business course for artists and others. An international program run by artist economist Kate Rich, the FMBA, when in Oz, is hosted by the equally impressive creative community-led social enterprise and small town transformation project Float. Float is a studio floating on Lake Tyers, where artists and scientists are providing a model for creative environmental stewardship in small towns and building a communiversity based on what they learn. Connected but more diverse and plural in its offering is Rebecca Conroy's Marrickville School of Economics. Quote, a creative accounting experiment and artist-led curriculum for studying and developing new ways to do economy, end quote. There are, of course, illustrious collectives and independents involved in this here FOPA, from the Public Pedagogies Institute to CRAM to MSCP, ISP. This forum is a benchmark for gathering critical public pedagogical doers and tinkerers, and to Testing Ground itself, a designer-led experimental institute nurturing, platforming, and facilitating a plethora of creative and critical pursuits through providing affordable access to space. Broader afield, the network expands into bombastic and wild formations, like the University of the Underground, quote, a free, pluralistic and transnational university based in the basement of nightclubs with headquarters in Amsterdam and London, and actively working with both institutions and nightlife to modify power structures through events, engineering situations, and experiences within, while supporting and empowering countercultures long term. To the more humble sites of genuinely diverse praxis, places like the Scuola Open Source SOS in Bari, Italia, who in their own words are a cooperative society, solidarity ecosystem of research and social, cultural, technological imagination, a space for the transformation of the existing. Also in Italy, the University of Ideas evolved from Art Povera's Artist Città dell'Arte, a program of residencies for art and social transformation based in a research centre and exhibition space, prototyping an experimental model combining theory and practice. Unity modules are open to students, professionals, activists, and the general public, and use a horizontal teaching method based on collective discussion and exchange of knowledge. Also in Italy is the Radical Writers Collective turned constellation of collectives, permanent workshops, artistic, cultural and political projects umbrellaed under the Wu Ming Foundation. Interestingly, QAnon, we'll just finish the lecture there, done? QAnon stole their name and their method from a book collectively written by the founders of Wu Ming under their original moniker Luther Blissett. The book was called Q. But of course, when the right wing develop a prank powerful enough to lead to insurrection, they don't take a leaf out of the autonomous praxis of the Blissetts and alert the public to its falsity before it gets violent. But of course, that was always going to be the case for the proto-fascist desperate Americans. If you're interested in that history, watch Q Into a Storm, which describes it, and their praxis is amazing. It's seriously amazing. They've written a book recently about this as well because they're like, wow, our hardcore leftist manifesto turned into the Capitol riots. The list of radical alternative pedagogical sites of organisation is forever long, and a proper analysis and critique would take another hour or more, but I think it has been important to establish the community of practice we are operating in, so we can share, discover, and support the creative experimental research and teaching we are undertaking. I'll funnel down on a few here before wrapping up and handing over to my erstwhiles, sharing the panel floor with me to discuss their own take on the topic of the radical formation of the RE and its role in critical public pedagogy, a la Luis Kamnitsa. Okay, Kunci Study Forum and Collective, an Indonesian collective concerned with sharing knowledge and tools through studying together at the intersections between effective, manual and intellectual labour. Their book, Tools for Radical Study, is concerned with the, quote, idea of tools as a way of articulating the educational process, as part of a growing praxis of artists and curators engaging in the educational turn. For Kunci and their School of Improper Education, the tools required for shared learning go beyond the material needs required for learning, treating the experience of learning not merely as a commodity but as an act of commoning. They develop procedures of how these tools are shared through a framework of care, togetherness and justice. In inviting education practitioners to share their tools, they have developed through collective learning practices, they interrogate effective strategies, tactics and methods of redistributing power in these learning spaces. Through this, they ask, how can these tools become more universal? Seventh has this book in our research library, a collectively curated resource initiated by Lucie to be used as a free reference and study site. You're welcome to come to Richmond and read it, scan it and print relevant sections of this very important collection of manuals. La Escuela is an artist-run platform for radical learning and collective making in public spaces. Evolving from the theories and work of the generation of Latin American thinker-doers like Kamnitsa, Paulo Freire, and Fernando Birri, La Escuela exemplifies the importance of community-led approaches to identity formation and critical consciousness raising in the so-called Global South. Arguably, there is a need for this across the globe, with tools, as per Kunci, becoming more universal. But there are qualities that arise from the history of struggle for socialism and autonomy and against oppression in regions like South America and Indonesia, which form very specific characteristics, and truly artist and community-led infrastructure, which we can learn from in the colonial West. If you're interested in the work of Escuela, I advise checking out the essay manifesto, The Naked School, by their founder, Miguel Braquelli. Third semi-deep dive, and last one. So, it's actually not, because I was going to dive into the public school, which is very interesting, but they're an autonomously organised direct education school with no curriculum, initiated by the Australian Sean Dockeray, who was also the founding director of the Los Angeles not-for-profit Telic Arts Exchange and initiator of the now-defunct knowledge-sharing platform arg.org. But doing that deep dive requires quite a bit of unpacking in time, which we're rapidly running out of. The public school and a broader research of Dockeray, who's now a senior lecturer at the Department of Fine Art at Monash, and peers is certainly inspiring and shows us what is possible with knowledge-sharing platforms online and in real life. We're going to talk a little bit just now about Seventh, what we've been up to. So since Lucie and I started Seventh in 2022 in the role of co-community manager, such a weird title, community manager. We always didn't understand it, but anyway. How do you manage a community? You don't. Anyway, we're managing the things that lead to community, I think. We've been a part of a wave seeing the gallery expand to a platform crossing exhibition, residency, community, socially engaged practice, artist-led classrooms, political public cinema, and radical reference library. Together with the rest of our peers at Seventh, our work builds on the decades of artist-run projects and programs that have seen thousands of practitioners supported, nurtured, and facilitated by hundreds of board members and staff from university arts education. Connected to, adjacent to, or completely removed from the university arts education system. Lucie will talk a bit more about the current and future trajectories of Seventh in a moment, but I thought I would just touch on a few works that have occurred in the recent years that exemplify the critical public pedagogical framework we're advocating here today. Oh, shit. Arty Farty Cities was an installation and intervention by union members working in the arts who critique the unsustainable structure of Australia's creative industry, shaped by elite interests and free market policies, while advocating for workplace solidarity and union activity amongst art workers. It's a great work. Dreaming with Dogs was a two-part curriculum exploring the creative potential of the relationship that humans have with dogs, focusing on dogs as subjects, companions, and collaborators. Working Through Scores was a two-part workshop led by composer James Hazel, where working-class artists from diverse backgrounds explored experimental composition and sonic practices using everyday sounds and technologies in a relaxed, inclusive setting. They were James's words. Seventh Cinema No. 1, 2023-24 season was a free 7-week outdoor film program curated by Lucie and guest artist Corrie Miles, exploring the intersections of neo-colonialism and global climate change. Each weekly screening paired a short film with a feature highlighting resilience, storytelling, and the enduring struggles for self-determination within global First Nations and oppressed communities. Seventh Cinema will continue in 2024-25 summer, very soon, with films inspired by Frantz Fanon's text concerning violence, featuring cinematic resistance epics like The Battle of Algiers, Embrace of the Serpent, and Tales of the Oblivion. Each feature will be preceded with a reading from Fanon, from Fanon's text by a Fanon scholar. Writing the Field was a site-responsive workshop by Mel Deerson that explored historical, sensory, and structural force fields through writing exercises, drawing on the gallery's layered history and the rebellious feminist and queer legacies of Richmond. Yes. Divine Intervention, Art and Facts by Bungelini, aka Robbie Thorpe. This is a highlight, phenomenal work. It's an exhibition highlighting Robbie Thorpe's artistic and political activism, including new works that used his just so cutting humour to critique colonial institutions, alongside archival materials that explore the history of black resistance and Robbie's own ongoing legal battles prosecuting the case of genocide against the Crown and Australia. The opening night featured a live recorded speech by Thorpe, which played throughout the exhibition, offering a powerful and critical commentary that coincided with the referendum on the voice to Parliament. Okay, I think I've taken up enough airspace, and it's now time to hand over to my illustrious colleagues. I did want to talk a poetic piece or two about the freedom and chaos of the RE and how theory on these sites can also be freed of the constraints and hierarchy of neoliberal agendas, but no time for that now. Instead, I will end with a final little rant, if you don't mind. In a moment of heresy on Thursday, when I couldn't be here, experiencing FOPA FOMO, walking the dog in the park, I clicked on my Black Mirror's suggestion to listen to Art is Always Political, an episode in the so-called Festival of Dangerous Ideas, FODI podcast. In trying to defend the position that actors wearing the keffiyeh at the end of a STC performance should not have worn it because it broke the contract that they had with the audience, i.e. the audience paid to see the actors, they paid to see them act, not to express their personal political opinion, host Simon Longstaff and pontificator Emil Sherman twisted a counter-argument by Lise Adler stating that artists have no more right to an opinion than a dentist. What fucking asshats. Why not let the dentist speak too? They all have a right to speak. And we have the same right to disagree. Have we got another slide? Where is it? There it is. They all have the same right to speak, and we have the same right to disagree or amplify or not their voice. I hope the next time these hedge lords, not edgelords, hedge lords, because I'm sure they have hedges, get a root canal, when they get a root canal from their dentists, that their Free Palestine pin falls off the lapel into their mouth, piercing their elitist aorta. Seriously, FOPA is coming for you, Fodi. Thank you for listening. I know it was long and I really appreciate your ears and eyes. And if we can keep hold of your attention for a little longer, I'd love to introduce Mel Deerson to the soapbox. Mel is an artist, writer and teacher, working both solo and collaboratively. Their work spans performance, video, sound, writing, drawing, curating and teaching in a prismatic way. They often reckon with the historical invisibility of queer desire, viewing it not as a lack, but as a generative portal for a revelatory, connecting spirit. This approach is explored through material exploration, site-responsive making, archival research, and community projects. Thank you.
clicks it'll take me each time. Let's see. Quite a few. Oh, there we go. Bam. Thank you so much. What a hard act to follow. Okay, so here I am. So my name's Mel. Sometimes when I'm reading I get a bit nervous, so if you hear my voice wobbling, that'll be why. Yeah, my slideshow isn't nearly as spectacular, so we'll just sit on this one for a little while. So I guess I want to start with my connection to ARIs and why they're really important to me as an artist and also as a teacher. So I'll start with that and then move into a few pedagogical projects that I've done or teaching in ARIs, and then some thoughts, but only a few of them. So I feel like I've grown up as an artist and a maker through Melbourne's ARIs. One of my first exhibitions was at 7th many years ago, and I recently, as Dario said, ran a writing workshop there, which felt like a really nice full circle for me. And I also got to contribute to 7th's community library, which was amazing and also a real trial to only pick whatever it was, 4 or 5 books. I've exhibited at pretty much every ARI in Melbourne in various communities over the years, and they've been really central to how I've developed my creative practice. I didn't have a conventional path to being an artist. My undergrad was in arts and a bit of art history, and I only decided to come and become an artist at about 25 or so, and I took a sort of DIY approach to becoming an artist, doing various courses at TAFE and graduate certificates, but really what clinched it was I became friends with some people at art schools, and I was like, fuck, I want to be part of this. And part of that was going to openings. I remember this, it sparked a memory when you were talking. I remember the moment I realised that like I was part of the art community for real was when I could go to, it was like a bus opening, and I could go to a bus opening without having to check if my friends were there first or if anybody was there first. It felt amazing, yeah. Yeah, so making and collaborating with friends who were artists and showing at ARIs, I think taught me the most about how to be an artist. So ARIs taught me how to make art and put on shows and how to organise events, work with other artists and be a performer as well. Things that are really useful to me still as an artist, but also as a teacher. And also knowing a bit behind the scenes of how ARIs work. It taught me that artists in the ARI system were not just artists, they're like bookkeepers and lease wranglers and lighting riggers and construction whizzes and designers and admin mavens and curators and writers and social media queens. And most of this is done through people teaching themselves to do that and teaching each other to do that, and as volunteers as well. And that has like it's never ceased to amaze me that these things hang together and that people just want to do it. It just feels like magic to me, yeah. So yeah, Ari's taught me that making art or making the art is only one bit of art making, and that working with other people is what makes the art world really rich for me. They also taught me that you don't have to rely on institutions. You can just do it yourself, particularly if you're surrounded by people who will support you or want to do it with you. So I think that's where the connection with ARIs and pedagogy, or ARIs and para-academia or like learning comes in. So now I'll switch to like my teaching life and kind of fill you in a bit on that. So I am a teacher as well, so I've taught at Monash University in art and theory, so teaching like studio and various different subjects about how to make art, and then like theory subjects and art history ones, so like learning how to think and write about it as well, although it's all kind of tangled together. But always as a casual teacher, so paid by the hour, and I don't know if I'm going to have work from semester to semester. So I see myself as a teacher, not an academic. Yeah, I love it. and I'm really good at it. But I know that my role is dispensable within those institutions, and it's not institutionally viewed as valid research or work. So although I really enjoy it, I don't feel romantic about it, and I often feel angry with how little teaching is valued within institutional structures. I really think of teaching as a creative practice in and of itself. Unis and academia can be great, but they have so much weird, warped fuckery in them that it can really, like, learning can feel much freer outside those structures sometimes. And so once I'd been doing teaching for a while and I was always practicing as an artist, I began building teaching into my art projects, sometimes in collaboration with people like Bryony Galligan or Spiros Panagirakis as well. So I just want to really quickly take you through a couple of different teaching projects that sit outside academia or on its periphery. Yes. Haha. So this is where I'm like going off piste. So yeah, we'll see. So this was Writing the Field, Text Plus Space, or Text and Space, which was a site-responsive writing workshop at 7th Gallery. It was an excuse for me to deep dive into some of the histories that were around 7th. So I think I'm always interested in like invisible histories or things that are hard to grasp. And so I found the Kingston Hotel nearby in Richmond, which in the 80s was a lesbian hotel, or what they called a women's hotel. There was also this amazing feminist press run out of somebody's apartment for many years just down the road. And also just the fact that 7th Gallery was a maternal and baby child healthcare centre, and that's what it was built as. It's also built on a rubbish tip. So there's all these like invisible histories that are kind of floating around, and I wanted to pair that with just some prompts for site-responsive writing. I know that writing feels like tricky for lots of artists, but also people in general, and I have this real vested interest in trying to make writing something that feels freer and easier and something that you can kind of just grasp in the moment without having to think about it so hard. So that involved a whole bunch of people coming and sitting in the hot sun with lots of sunscreen on and wandering around and writing from various prompts. Oh, that's just the only documentation I have of the whole thing. It says the joys of being the teacher, you know. There we go. So just quickly, this is a course, Art and Poetry, run through art program. This was such a joy to get to do. This is something that I'd wanted to teach in a university for as many years as I'd been teaching there, but that there was never capacity for or any ability for them to do. And the basis of this was, it was just like a Zoom class. There were 5 classes. I had about 50 participants in the end. It was amazing how many people were interested. And the idea was that there was no homework. You come as you are. I share a bunch of art and writing on a theme, a loose theme, and kind of talk to you about it, my thoughts a little bit, and then just give you some prompts that feel like it's coming to it from different angles and that you can just come to, and you write in class. So you get however much writing time in class. There's no obligation to share what you've written. It's just a matter of like, how do you make space with other people for writing? And taking off that pressure for it to be good, and taking off that pressure to perform in front of other people. That felt really important. So there are some of the prompts below. The first one is my favourite, which is to write a curse. Oh. So this one was quite recently at Gertrude Contemporary, part of the Same Page Art Book Fair, with the amazing poet and artist Manisha Anjali. I realised we had a shared, deeply dorky love and adoration of medieval mystic women's poetry, and I just thought, oh my God, if we propose this, I'll be able to hear her talk about it, and then I'll be able to share it as well. And so that was just like a total joy, and we've got a vague plan to try and develop a course around that as well. Yeah. And then the last one is Fairy, an experiment in queer art pedagogy, which I ran with Spiros Panigarakis, who's an artist and also happens to be the head of department at Monash University in Fine Art. He used to be my supervisor, but now we're also friends and we work together. I did my master's there. So I'll just be very quick with this one, but we were given access to a quite strange space in the Fitzroy Gardens, an old wedding venue, for 3 weeks. And it was right next to this very weird and complex artwork called the Fairies Tree by a possibly queer woman done in maybe the 1920s. But we decided that we wanted to have an exhibition in the space, but to actually have the exhibition be this structure for a whole bunch of teaching and learning and performance, folding in both our students that we were teaching and then also other people's students as well as the public in a series of like workshops, lectures and so on. And the thread between it all was the figure of the fairy as a kind of queer cipher. So everybody involved was queer. And people unravelled this figure, this slippery kind of cipher of queerness and the fairy in these various different ways. We've got a very long list of people involved because there were so many students involved as well. And then that had various iterations and turned into a book as well. So this is some of the workshops. This was a favourite, a collage workshop with Narago artist Peter Waples-Crowe. So 60 first-year fine art students making fairy collages with him was just like mind-blowingly good. We also didn't get any funding for it. So Spiros basically paid for it himself and made sure all the artists got paid. And we also managed to siphon funds from the university by getting people to give talks and workshops as part of classes that we were running, which meant that we could pay them as visiting lecturers. So a way of para-academia in kind of a different way. This is a book we made that's based on old school readers from the late 90s and 2000s. If people went to uni then, the stench of fear and photocopying in them. And that's it. And then I'll just like Dario style give you my last little diatribe and then I'll be done. So yeah, I feel as if the teaching I do at REs and these artist-run pedagogical projects are a kind of siphoning off of the skills I honed and the content I've learned from my uni job. So I feel like I can channel the good things out of the institution and jettison some of the things I find challenging, like the precarity, the pressure, the exploitation, marking, etc. And I just remember at the writing workshop I ran at 7th, I was so delighted that some of my art students came along and participated, and they didn't have to be there. It really meant a lot, and that they came there on their own time. And for me, part of my creative practice is very like inner focus, like a spiritual or like soul practice that's about kind of amplifying my own insides through art and music and various things. And then part of it is outer focused, so to do with like the lending of like that spark or my spark out to others. And that's what teaching is for me. So trying to help people find confidence and enthusiasm and to kindle devotion for their own creativity. And also to unhook learning from outcomes. So to love learning and making as a practice, rather than being invested in making something good. Almost everything we make or I make is terrible, and that is fine. It doesn't matter. It's the making that matters. And so I see teaching and art making as entwined, just part of the big creative practice that is my life. Creativity is for everyone, and that is so powerful. And teaching feels like where the ethics or the politics of my practice is most active. And to bring it back, I think REs often feel like the spaces where the ethics and politics of practice are most active too. Okay, thank you. I'm so sorry for going on so long. So now to George, Lucie, John, and then Dario and me.
It's quite hot, so I feel like let's take 5 minutes so you can drink some water, because then I'll facilitate the discussion, ask some questions, but the interaction is key there to all think together. works.
Sweet.
So have a beer. I hope you have as well, because FOPA lives on the beers. All right, so. Well, thank you so much. I'm very honored to be like just facilitating this discussion and this panel with the people I've been working with for a year now, and I've seen so much happening. It feels like I've been here for 10 years, and and I wish you all to live very long for these things to happen. So the idea is maybe just let you introduce yourself with one sentence at first. So Lucie.
Hi everyone, my name is Lucie. Is my mic working?
Not yet.
Is it on now? Yeah. My name's Lucie. I'm the current director of 7th Gallery. I'm an artist. I've also, I've worked for other ARIs before. I used to be the chair of the board at Blindside. And similarly to Mel, a lot of the things that I've done in the community building that has happened since I moved to Melbourne when I was a late teenager has happened in ARIs. And so, yeah, I guess I really believe in them. I believe in them as kind of more than just these spaces to produce exhibitions. I think they can do a lot more than that. And so, yeah, I guess that's been a lot. That's a lot of what my focus has been, I suppose, in my work. But that's my introduction to myself. I'll pass over to you, George.
Good evening, everyone. My name's George. I'm an artist and an activist, I guess. 7th is my first experience of an ARI, or I guess the bricks and mortar version of an ARI. I've been involved in artist-run initiatives throughout my entire practice, I guess, from being in goth rock punk bands to guerrilla filmmaking to forest activism, Indigenous justice support and disability art, just working with collectives, I guess, as an artist, or being an artist in that space, not necessarily making art from the space, but just being disciplined as an artist, as a human. And yeah, it's been very interesting working at 7th, having seeing an artist-run initiative become concrete, I guess, something that has a history and something that has a future, and yeah.
Cool. Thanks, George. George is our chair, which is really nice. He sits on this chair.
Yeah, stool.
It's a stool, damn. You're not in your role now then. I'd like to welcome CC and Gillian are also on our board. Thank you for supporting us again by being here. Dario, basically you know who I am now because you listened to me talk for half an hour. Not much more to add, Me too. I've done a PhD, and that's why I overwrite. I'm an extreme procrastinator, which is why I wrote that in 2 sittings. I like to challenge paradigms through art and community building, activism, and other things which can't be spoken about sometimes. I believe that FOPA is really cool, actually. I think it's necessary. I really love what Joseph does here with testing grounds. This is the real deal, right? Everything that we're doing. Currently, mal-employed, I think is the term that Matt used on the first day. So if anyone knows of anything to make me un-mal-employed, it would be appreciated. I'm going to pass it on to Mel.
You've heard of me, so we're fine. But also just testing grounds is amazing. Like, one of the first things I ever did was at testing grounds. Like, they're so generous. Like, yeah, they're just like, and they've been doing it for ages and in all these different spots, and it always is just like so generous. So yeah, that's all I have to add.
Go, Joe.
And I'm John. I'm a board member at 7th, co-director of Ordinance. The gallery opened 2 months ago in the CBD, producer, and I'm a PhD candidate as well. And I'm going to be, as I said, facilitating this discussion. And since I come from philosophy, I might start with like questions that sounds boring. It's like, I go to the text, but I'll do it in a airy way, which is, like every time I go to the to the table during a board meeting, I ask a big concept and then I let people fight until we decide what we're doing. So I think it's a good thing after everything that's been said, I would be starting with like a concept that can be defined, and somebody would say, I agree, or I actually never use that term, what are you talking about? But yeah, but actually you agree with that, right? So what do we do? And that's the what do we do is the thing that is actually the most important part, and that's what we do in Aries and what we're doing here. So anytime getting too long like now, interrupt me and say stuff. So first question would be probably asking for you first, I would say, because of your text, on that concept of critical public pedagogy that you said Chemnitz is not really using, but it's something that is, in our synopsis, I think it's a good thing to start with this because people can agree, disagree, and fight, which is great.
So critical public pedagogy is a term that's used to describe Louis Chemnitz's work, but he doesn't use it himself. When people ask him what he does, he says he's an artist and that everything else is underneath the umbrella of that. So his community organising work, his pedagogy work, his writing work, everything that he does are just modes, mediums of art practice. And it's a really important fact, I think, to make, right? The notion of we know what critical means, we know what pedagogy means, and I think the important word in there is public. You could find a better word for it, right? But public is, for all intents and purposes, yes, it means toilets, but also it means the people. And so it's the pedagogy, it's the education, which is critical. It needs to happen. It's not just about criticism, it needs to happen. There's crises, there's a palimpsest of crisis, and we need education for the people that is free, and ultimately that's what he means by that.
I guess the other thing that he means by that, and expanding on the idea of free, is that it's not that you don't have to pay for it, it's that you're not working towards a job like you do when you're in the university. You're not working within a system that is producing somebody that's going to produce capital. And that's really important for him. And I think that's also really important for Aries. And that's kind of where this idea of collective equipment and para-academia is so important, because it's kind of working against or counter to this system where we think university is free. It's this like utopian space, but really it's just part of social reproduction. It's just kind of training us to be good workers. That's what school is as well. There's like a violence in that. So yeah. And
I think one of the things that Chemnitz talks a lot about as well is the futuring potential of this kind of pedagogy. That it's actually what he says, and I don't necessarily agree with everything he talks about, but he talks about how he wants people to learn how to write before they learn how to read, because he wants people to actually engage in coding, right? Not just trying to understand the code that's come before. He wants people to engage in their full creative self and to know that they can do that before they have to go and actually engage with what has happened in the past. What's happened in the past is a language that necessarily is already encoded and is stayed and needs to be transformed. And I think that that's a really kind of whether we fully agree with that or not, I think the idea of that is really, really powerful.
Do you want to build on this, Mel? Because I know that we went to something else, and in some ways makes me think about other things like the coding and the writing before. It's very Willem Flosser way of talking about writing, and it feels like it's actually kind of echoing what Daniel Ross was saying yesterday, for those who were there, on the fact that everyone talked about AI. I'm going to say that term even here now. Apologies. Everyone has been talking about it, but if that's something that we, in a less speculative way, is happening, that Daniel Ross was pointing at, is the fact that we are learning to not do anymore, which is that concept of proletarization that Stigler is taking from Marx in another way, and reasserting the idea of learning to code, as in writing, experiencing, doing, talking, thinking, and not giving that to either someone, a function, or an algorithm, or maybe at some point other form of intelligence. That's where I think we find freedom, creativity, and humanity, maybe, which I cannot define myself.
Yep. Sorry, I was just going
No, if you want to develop on this, otherwise I ask you why you were saying that actually you would say your practice is more of an uncritical pedagogy.
I thought you were going to bring that up. Yes.
Yeah.
So when we were talking about this just before, I was like, I'm not sure that I would call what I do a critical pedagogy. I was like, I think I would call it like uncritical pedagogy, because I think I have, well, one, this idea of like criticality, I feel is so kind of bound into university systems and tertiary systems of learning, and there's a place for it, but I think actually that a place of creativity and making has to somehow and at some point be unharnessed from that, and I think that happens like at the source, and then you can like introduce critique like once it's emerged. But I think of like uncriticality as like what I try and bring to like my students and what they give me, as in like, yes, just like do it. It doesn't matter if it's shit, it doesn't matter if it's wrong, just do it, you know? And I guess I also think of Eve Kosofsky-Sedgwick and this idea of like reparative reading versus paranoid reading. So a paranoid reading would be like you need to kind of unpack and unpick everything. And this idea of a reparative reading as being oriented towards like love and surprise when it comes to making. But then you said that no, criticality is about like it being a critical, as in like it's so important, and I do believe it in that way, you know? Yeah.
I think it is true, and also I think that the way it's utilised by Kamnitsa, it's not necessarily about critique, it's about radicalism, right? It's about being critical of the structures that exist, and you're doing that, I believe, by getting people together and creating together. So by the very act of doing that, you're not engaging in social reproduction of capital. And so I think that it's fine for you to self-determine as your work is uncritical, and I think you should, and I think it's wonderful.
No, I was just being bratty, really.
Yeah, no, and I'm being bratty back because I think it's... for me, like, I have this kind of notion of criticality, which I kind of put together with the term dreaming, which is a bit of a thing for me, right? And it's like, you know, we need to do critical dreaming, this thing which is about, you know, critically evaluating what the fuck's going on, but doing it through dreaming, through art, through making, through imagination, through creativity. And it's critical to do that dreaming collectively together now, because if we don't, you know, the systems as they are just continue to oppress us.
I guess, like, just kind of to build upon that too, the idea of education kind of in a Western epistemological way is very kind of, it's like siloed into disciplines, and obviously there's been like the Steiner approach to education and many, many others that try to kind of break down those barriers, but those systems are so reliant on the deconstruction of the barriers themselves. It's not just like everything everywhere all at once, just like the movie. But but there are so many other ways of learning that are not this kind of, that are not a Western universalized kind of way.
Yeah.
And yeah, I thought maybe, George, you might want to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, well, you know, there's a momentum that is lost in the universities. There's a momentum that is lost in these institutions that, you know, that, like, you know, before universities, it was up to the employer to educate their workers and, you know, and invest in their workers, and now that's been outsourced to institutions, so effectively these institutions are creating commodities. Artists are expected to create commodities, and REs provide a space where, you know, momentum can occur without having to create a commodifiable experience. Hence, the experience can be less tempered and more ferocious. And I think, you know, for me, REs are a space where, you know, politically charged momentum can be relatively unbound, and they're the kind of things that, you know, generate transformative momentum, social movements that almost no other art institution can do. effectively and still exist, I guess, because...
And we've seen that play out over the last 12 months, I think, when obviously, boards and lawyers and different philanthropists that are connected with different art organisations in Melbourne, but also across the world, have withdrawn funding to organisations showing solidarity with Palestine or any other, probably more so actually in the last year than any other time in history, but it's become, what we already knew, but deeply, deeply obvious. And we're lucky that...
That's such a really interesting point that also goes back to what Pell Mell Studio was talking about when, the first introduction by Matt here, what's our relationship to the state? What's our relationship to capital? These are really important questions. And it's kind of parallel to another thing that I love about ARIs, in that ARIs basically are art purvera in practice, right? They're essentially poor spaces where you don't really have to worry about what that board member is going to think about the work that you're doing, because it's fucking artist-led. And we had that when we had an amazing artwork came in last year where I was like, oh, we're a little bit concerned about what's going to happen here. And everyone's like, nah, the artist is defining it. This is cool. And I lost the first part of what I was saying. But I think that, so it balances out as well with this idea that, one of the reasons I find, ARIs and, these kinds of sites really important and interesting is that you can collectively organise. You can start a revolution. You can have a whole bunch of people getting together and minting money, whatever you want to do. Like, let's say you're going to do something extremely illegal. You can do it at an ARI because no one's looking.
We are right next to the massive police station in Richmond, and we have activist meetings there, and they just think we're doing art workshops.
This is actually the whole. That's really my whole thesis. Like, let's use them now, right?
Yeah.
People have been watching
can.
churches and shit.
Yeah, I guess kind of riffing off something that Mel was talking about when we were preparing downstairs 10 minutes before we got up to speak. Speaking a little bit about the fairy methodology and kind of thinking about this idea of shape-shifting and kind of being multiple things all at the same time and being also not those things as well. That's very much to me kind of what an ARI is, what an ARI does. It's like an art collective. It's also like a pretend professional organisation. It's also an art gallery. It's also an events organising company. It's also anything you want it to be. And I guess that is so reliant on the people that are oiling the machine at the time. So it grows and it changes and it kind of does go on. I mean, Seventh has been going for over 20 years now, and we looked at that other artist-run space that started in Woolloomooloo in the 70s that only lasted for about 2 or 3 years when it just flashed up in an image. We didn't talk about it, but they can go on for a long time or they can pop up and pop down. And I think it doesn't matter as well. Like, there's always this anxiety around, I don't want to be the director that kills Seventh or, whatever it is. But sometimes I'm like, I guess it doesn't really matter. Maybe there's plenty of other ARIs. I mean, Seventh's not going to die, but it's just to reassure you. But it doesn't matter, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, well, ARIs are also a space where art can disappear, and and just the charge that the work leaves behind is maintained by in the walls, in the history, in the story, and hopefully not in the cells of the police station next door. but
they're not onto us. It's
not
fine.
yet.
I think it's cool, like, sorry, you wanted to keep...
No, that's...
No, please.
No, I'm done.
You're done. Yeah. Just, I love the idea of, like, and it happens around the world, like nomadic schools that kind of have the kind of pedagogy that we're talking about, do the kind of organising we're talking about. They deliberately don't want to have 4 walls. There's a really good reason for that. It's actually a lot easier to keep your queer methodology going when you're, out in the desert or you're in the forest or you're in someone else's space, But the idea of actually having to do the hard work of also keeping the 4 walls clean, like, that's extraordinary. And there's some really interesting models that we looked at in this research at 126 Gallery in Scotland. They've been going for 28 years, I think, and they built into their model right at the start 2-year term limits for everyone, right? And it's partially to deal with burnout, and no one's ever paid, which is, you know, something which I talked about before. You know, it's flexible how you can kind of deal with that one. But they're, you know, in an ecology where they're well funded, right? So they're paying their artists, their rent is capped, right? So you can deal with those kind of things. It's okay, a bit easier to be a kind of full-time volunteer or a volunteer in that space.
It's probably pretty hard for them now as well, like who knows?
Yeah,
I'd say the last couple of years,
exactly.
Their rent's probably tripled. Is there any more? I thought also we're coming to the end, so maybe if anyone...
absolutely. That's what it was.
What's the time?
Well, we reach out 90 minutes, so
Should we,
I will open the floor if anyone wants to ask any questions.
Or tell us off.
And tell us off, yeah. It's N or it's N for me.
Or contribute.
Or contribute, yeah. Or say something that comes to mind.
Mic now. There was like a kind of artist who was going to show at 7th, and you were worried about it. Like, what was the worry?
Oh, it was Robbie Thorpe at his first ever art exhibition, and he did such an amazing job. Like, he's phenomenal, but he's like, you know, fully anti the voice, right? And his speech that he did, which we recorded and then we projected up on the wall, was basically like, not only don't vote no, just don't vote, right? Really important position for an Aboriginal person to have who actually wants proper sovereignty and treaty, not some, you know, thing which means that Aboriginal people are agreeing to the Constitution, the illegal Constitution. So, you know, we had a debate about that. And we were like, yeah, fuck it. Like, it's actually, this is his truth. And it's really important.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and that's, I mean, it doesn't happen very often, I suppose, but it is fun when it does happen. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is like in an institutional context, there's way more rules policing that, but like when you guys find yourselves having to be like the, you know, like calling the shots about like ethics and morality or OH&S even, or it's like...
Yeah, I guess, and that's like a very freeing kind of element of being within an artist-run platform. I mean, I've also had lots of crappy jobs in real institutions before, and yeah, it totally sucks, like having to go through whatever hierarchy of managerialism that exists to come to a really boring outcome that would have been that we wouldn't show that work. You know, like that's what the outcome would have been. But we can just send a group WhatsApp and be like, yep, all right, we're doing it, good. And that's kind of really good, I think. It's a good methodology.
Yeah, and we can share the responsibility as well and deflect the responsibility and
Ignore
the responsibility. But yeah, no one person, you know, like as a team, we're all watching each other's backs, and we can ensure that no one person's going to fall over and be responsible for the decision. And if the RE explodes, you just start another one with the same momentum.
Exactly. And hopefully, if we're starting another one at some stage, I'm sure we will, we can have an opportunity where the infrastructure we're working with is already socialised. Because, like, seriously, it's like the major issue that we all face in life, generally, as renters in rentier capitalism, is, like, it's really difficult to have large... Look at this, this is amazing, this place, and there's a great, you know, deal that's going on with this, you know, and it's really rare, right? But actually having serious property in CBD, in the urban area, where you know for the next 100 fucking years, people are going to be able to come to do this. Like, that is key. For me anyway, right?
Well, I think too, you know, a lot of the first kind of self-organised artist-run or community-led spaces that started in the 60s and 70s, well, there were even some that started in the 30s actually, but obviously there was kind of rentier capitalism going on back then, but it just is nowhere near like what exists today. And so you have artists renting lofts in New York City. You have people setting up in the Nicholas building for much, much cheaper than it is now. The gallery in Woolloomooloo, you know, and that kind of, we know that space is important because it's a space to be.
Yeah. The thing about socialising it over long term is that it doesn't privilege the fact that you were born post First World War and you happen to be given, you know, half of Lake Tyres because you fought in the war. Like, what the fuck, right?
Yeah.
Like, if I was to go and fight, you know, in the incoming war with China because we have to, because we're in Australia, America, and like, I'm not going to be given anything afterwards, am I? I'm just going to be charged more rent. So, you know, like, it's a serious problem.
It's a very serious problem. Yeah, my first studio was bigger than this room, and I paid $160 a week for it.
There you go.
In Thornbury.
Wow, with doll money.
With doll money, yeah.
I really wish this was filming the people's faces because
Is there any? Oh no, you go, Mel.
I just wanted to say, also there are so many people running REs out of their share houses, like, and in their backyards over summer and stuff. So it's like, you know, this is amazing, but also you don't need this. Like, if you're renting, you can still do it. Like, yeah. So I just wanted to.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's always another way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just aware that we're right on 8:30 now. So if is there anyone else that wants to contribute a comment, or is there any other questions? There's also no pressure to have a question if you don't want to. Maybe we'll call it then.
What is art?
Yeah.
We're done?
What is art? No.
Oh, what is art?
What is art?
Okay. It's a 3-letter word, John. Didn't you hear Dario before?
Arty. Thank you so much.
Thanks everyone for coming.
Thank you.